in 1953, Bill and Margie Samuels, they purchased this land. At that point in time, it was around 200 acres, and they paid a mere $35,000 for it. But what it did have to offer at that point in time was a 10-acre spring-fed limestone filtered lake. There were readily available grains on this site, and this distillery behind me was also here in 1953. Now, folks, Bill Sr. was not fond of his family's bourbon that they were actually producing at that time, which was T.W. Samuels from Bardstown, Kentucky. So when he was due to inherit it from his family, he decided he wanted to take that 170-year-old family recipe and set that shit on fire, okay? Now, Bill Sr., being the rebel that he wanted something more full-flavored, well-balanced, and then did not have that bitter taste. That is why he said the hell with it. Now, folks, all of our grains here, they will be outsourced. Our corn and wheat are going to be harvested within a 60-mile radius of this facility, and then our barley will be coming from the Great Plains area, like the Dakotas. We'll get 7 grain trucks that come in each day, 5 corn, 1 wheat, 1 barley. Now, each truck will come over here on this side. We will take a small sample of it for quality assurance, just to make sure there's no mold or moisture in the contents. And as long as it passes our inspection, there are 3 silos here attached to the still house. They will sit in that silo and await their fate. But if they do not meet those standards here at Maker's Mark, we're going to give that driver just enough money to get them down towards Tennessee's way, okay? But folks, our mash bill will consist of 70% corn, 16% soft red winter wheat, and 14% barley. Now, Bill and Margie, they did a lot of baking of different kinds of breads to get those specific grain characteristics. And if you've ever had Maker's Mark anywhere in this world, it's only ever been produced here at this very facility, and we've only ever used the one mash bill to date. All right, so next we're gonna head on inside. All right, folks. Y'all push on up here. I do a lot of pointing. I want to make sure everybody is seeing what I am talking about. So welcome inside of our steel house here. Now, folks, over here to your right, you're going to be looking at a roller mill. Now, that roller mill, it is going to help us to control how coarse or how fine the grains actually turn out. Now, looking back there on that 3rd shelf, you are going to see the grains on the right-hand side as they would come off of the truck. And then on the left-hand side, after they have been through that roller mill, that is what we want them to look like. Now, our competitors, they are going to be using a hammer mill, which that hammer mill is still going to leave some of that husk intact. Which again, remember, we don't want that for our bourbon. So that is why here at Maker's Mark, we will continue to use the roller mill. And then from there, we are going to be using a cooker. We have 3 cookers here. You're able to see the top of that 3rd one straight back. So we are going to be taking back set for consistency purposes, limestone filtered water, and corn. We're going to bring all of that to a boil, allowing it the time to cook and break down. Then we're going to drop the temperature, adding in that wheat, again, same process, allowing it the time to cook and break down. And then lastly, folks, we are going to be adding in that barley. Now, that is about a 3.5-hour process of just cooking the grains alone. And the barley is actually going to be working to convert the starches from the corn and wheat into fermentable sugars. Next step in our process, folks, is in that next room up there. That is our fermentation room. I assure you we're going to get there very shortly. But for right now, all you need to know, it's a 3-day process up there. And on that 3rd day, we're going to have what we call a distiller's beer. And it's going to be roughly 8 to 10% alcohol. So, folks, we're going to take the contents from this cooker. We're then going to add it into one of those fermenters in the next room. And then we'll be using sour mash or spent grain from the previous batch. And that is just for consistency purposes. And then, folks, we'll also be pumping in some yeast to that vat. And the yeast is what's actually going to be hard at work to create carbon dioxide on day 1. Day 2 is going to be heat. And then on day 3, which is what we all want, is alcohol. Okay? Now, our next step in our process, we're going to be double distilling here at Maker's Mark. So first distillation process will be through this copper column steel. It stands at 5 stories tall. So folks, we'll take the contents from the fermenter. We're then going to add it into the very top of this 5-story steel, and it's going to start to work its way back and forth across 16 perforated copper plates. And then there's going to be some steam that is pumped in from that base. So as that steam does rise and those vapors condense, we're going to have what we call our low wine, and it's going to be roughly 120 proof at that point in time. And folks, that should be what is coming out of this tail box is our low wine. Now, our second distillation process, we're going to be using a double still. That's actually located right under your feet in our basement, all right? And folks, that will be coming off of that steel at roughly 130 proof. And it's what we like to call high wine, but I'm sure some of you all have heard it called white dog or white lightning. And that should be what is coming out of this tail box here. Now, the last thing we are going to talk about in this room, folks, is this barrel sitting right behind this gentleman from West Virginia. That barrel is coming straight from the very first product that Margie and Bill ever produced in 1958. And folks, Keeneland Racetrack in Lexington, Kentucky was our first customer. So they bought the first 14 cases from that barrel. So grab a few photos down here, and next we are heading up to those fermenters, all right?
That's not because they're cooking it. That's the yeast doing its thing.
Yeah. Wow.
1800 cypress wood vats fermenters that I was telling you about. Now, before we get into that, folks, there was a family making and producing their craft. It was the Burks family, and they were making what was called Happy Hollow Creek bourbon back in the mid-late 1800s and early 1900s. But folks, their bourbon did not take flight quite like Maker's Mark. So when Bill and Margie purchased this land in 1953, folks, they bought a steel at that $35,000 price point. I mean, again, that was a lot of money in 1953, but again, they bought a steel because these vats that you were looking at, they were already here in the facility ready for them to come in and start making this product, okay? Now, folks, with this cypress wood, there are no impurities in it. So that is why we will continue to use this to make our product. But if you look down this hallway, you're going to see the start of our stainless steel vats that are going to be doing the exact same thing that you're just getting to see firsthand today. And that is the beauty of this cypress wood. So we're going to marry the cypress with the stainless steel, and folks, you're not going to know what came from either. So that is why we will continue to use these to make our product. Now, folks, on day one, it's going to look more like this one. Feel free to come over and get you some free smells. So on day one, we've got that carbon dioxide being released. But folks, it should be
really
smelling more like
down,
a
it's just
cream
because it's so active. It's kind of like how ice expands.
Okay, so come over here,
air
get
in
you
there.
some free smells out of there. There are no heating or cooling elements on these vats here, okay? So again,
going back for the free smells.
The yeast is what actually our network produces. Now, folks, I should have paid a little more attention in science class because to me, that's kind of crazy that the yeast is what's actually doing this and nothing more than that, okay, on day one. Now, folks, on day two, it's going to look more like this one right behind it here. Oh, you're fine. I see it every day. So, folks, on day two, this is what it should look like. So we still have that carbon dioxide being released on day two, but you should feel some heat radiating off of this one on day two as well. And again, nothing more than the yeast that is hard at work here. All right? Now, folks, our day three batch is going to look more like this one all the way over. So, folks, on day three, we could still have a little bit of that carbon dioxide being released, but once it subsides, we should have about a 6 to 8 inch grain cap. So it's going to look more like this kind of over in this area. But again, I can tell you that it's not ready just yet because, again, you can see some of that carbon dioxide still being released on this day three. So again, a 6 to 8 inch grain cap will be on top. But what we actually want are the contents under that grain cap, okay? So this 6 to 8 inch grain cap is going to stay behind for the next batch. But folks, we're going to be donating this to local cattle farmers, and at 8 to 10% alcohol, they're going to be some pretty happy cows when it is all said and done here. Now the silver pole is an aerator, so it is pushing down the substance that we want to the bottom. Because folks, there's about a softball-sized drain hole at the bottom of these vats that are connected to that steel that will start that distillation process here. And each one of these vats are going to form their own sealant around. That's to not let anything seep out here, okay? And as you can see, our vats, they go all the way down to our basement floor. They are 12 by 12. They hold roughly 10,000 gallons of content. And each one of these fermenters are yielding about 25 barrels per fermenter. And to put that into a little more perspective, here at Maker's Mark, you get approximately 240 bottles out of one barrel. And each one of these are producing 25 barrels. And folks, don't forget, we have an additional 54 stainless steel in the back, same size, doing the exact same thing. directing your attention back to where we just came from and looking at that logo or emblem. So the S is going to be for Samuels.
What's that? Oh, they did.
Warehouse. This is Warehouse A. It was built in the late 1800s, again, by that family that preceded the Samuels family. Again, it was the Burks family, and they were making what was called Happy Hallow Creek way back when. Now, folks, this warehouse is going to stand at 3 stories tall, and it's going to hold about 4,000 barrels in here when it was full. But if you came in through Loretto, Kentucky this morning, you may have seen some of our other rick houses out there. Now, they are going to be standing at 7 stories tall, and they're going to be holding anywhere between 53 and 58,000 barrels in them when they are full. Folks, as I always like to say, business ain't half bad here at Maker's Mark, all right?
How many of those black storage buildings were there?
55, and we're building an additional 2 as we speak, so we'll have 57. Yes,
There you
ma'am.
go.
Yes, it goes back for days, quite literally. Now, speaking of barrels, our barrels are going to be coming from a place called Independent Stave Company, or Kentucky Cooperage. It is located just right down the road in my hometown of Lebanon, Kentucky. So they are going to take new American white oak staves. The staves itself, they're going to be seasoned outside for 1 year. Now, seasoning those staves are just going to help to break down any of those tannins. We have any wine drinkers in here?
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. So you want those tannins in your wine, but we don't want that crap in our bourbon. So that is why they will sit out and endure all 4 seasons that Kentucky does have to offer. And folks, depending on what day you're in Kentucky, you just may get 4 seasons all in one day, okay? But after that, the barrel itself can be constructed. Now, if you do ever get an opportunity to come back to this part of Kentucky, try to get a tour at Independent Stave. Folks, I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Because folks, it takes them a minute and a half to construct a barrel. And I promise you, you would want to see that, okay? It's about a 45-minute tour. They run Monday through Friday. And the last one, I think, is around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then after that, for Maker's Mark, they will use a level 3 char. And that just basically means the barrel itself is going to sit in an open flame for roughly 40 to 45 seconds. And remember that char is what's going to help give it some of its color and some of its flavor over its lifespan while it is in the ricks. All right, so they'll bring those barrels down to us. Of course, we're going to check them for any defects because we don't want that distillate seeping out. As long as it passes our inspection, we're going to be taking that 130 proof distillate that is clear like moonshine. We're going to proof it down, meaning adding more limestone water to get it to 110 proof. All Maker's Mark products, no matter what product we are producing, goes into our barrels at 110 proof. And then, folks, we will seal it with a walnut bung and then stick it at the top of one of those 7-story ricks where it's going to be spending 3 hot and humid Kentucky summers. Then anything that was on top will immediately come to the bottom. Anything that was on the bottom will go directly to the top because, as you know, heat rises and things can and will mature faster in that respect. And the same goes for the middle. So 7 to 1, 6 to 2, 5 to 3, and so on. Now, the maturity rate for a barrel here at Maker's Mark takes anywhere between 6 to 8 years to be fully matured. And folks, throughout its lifespan, we do have around 30 to 40 employees that are analyzing that bourbon, okay? From the time it comes off of the second still all the way up until it does go to bottling. Because here at Maker's Mark, we age by taste and not time. And folks, we're only using the barrels once, and then we're going to ship them off to a place called Lefroy. They make scotch in Scotland. and helping us to control. Now, like I said, you are hearing that air running, but folks, you see how tall these ceilings truly are. It again is just more for circulating purposes in here. Now, folks, this is again home of Makers 46. 46 will be housed on either side in the rigs, and each side's going to hold about 1,000 barrels. Now, remember, it's only going to be in here for 9 weeks, then it has to go to bottling. Because again, we do not want it to take on any other flavor than what Bill Jr. truly wanted. And folks, his taste vision, he wanted something that was yummy, he wanted something that highlighted natural flavors, and then something that had a longer finish on it at the end, okay? Now, there is a newer venture here at Maker's Mark. It is called Private Select or Private Selection. Folks, you may have seen it at your local liquor stores. Hell, you've maybe even indulged in it, okay? If you haven't, though, you are gonna try some today during the tasting portion. And that is what these barrels are gonna be out here on our ground floor. They are for our Private Select customers. So folks, think of it as a single barrel program, or Maker's Mark's version of a single barrel program. So anyone with a liquor license is gonna come down, they're gonna be wine and dine in that room behind you, and they're gonna be tasting 5 different flavor profiles. All right, so of course, folks, they will taste that 46 stave profile, but then they also will be tasting the spice stave profile, the Cuvée stave profile, the Mondiant stave profile, and the P2 or pure stave profile. So again, just to recap, you have to have a liquor license. You're coming down here. You're going to be tasting all 5 of these staves. And folks, just like the 46, you have to have a total of 10 staves that goes into your barrel. So at the end of the day, uniquely, it will be your version of Maker's Mark. All right? Now, remember I told you earlier that you get approximately 240 bottles out of 1 barrel here at Maker's Mark? Well, they take home 239 bottles, and they get to take home their barrel. So that is why there's writing on a lot of these barrels here, all right? Because we're going to keep the one in the bourbon library to kind of remember them by, and they will take home 239 bottles and their barrel. Now, folks, everyone wins, okay? Because right off the top, Maker's Mark is going to make good money, I can assure you of that, okay? But everyone else wins too, so your total wines, liquor barns, beverage warehouses. Folks, they sell it for the upwards of $85 to $95, and I don't do math very well, but that's around $24,000 at that 239 bottle. That price point. But who really is going to win are your bars and restaurants. So 20 years ago, when I was going out pretty hot and heavy, folks, it was Thirsty Thursdays, $10 all you could drink. They did not use a jigger back then, okay? But nowadays, they use that jigger, they're charging you double, even triple, and I can assure you they're not gonna give you any more than what you truly paid for. I don't care how much you flirt with somebody, okay? So again, it is your bars and restaurants that are gonna be winning out in this game, because it is all a game, folks. Anybody have any questions? And besides this gentleman, anybody want to buy a barrel?
The liquor.
Saying yes, absolutely. Sir, you better figure that out, okay? She's saying yes, most definitely. Like, she's smiling about it.
So, do they do each barrel individually in those and then blend them together? Like with each stave profile is like
So
one barrel, one stave profile.
So if you wanted one that had 4 of the Cuvée, you're going to have 4 Cuvée staves in there.
Okay.
And it's just going to be the traditional.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then we're only going to use them once.
Gotcha.
And
So
then we throw 'em
you
out.
pick the recipe type. Gotcha.
already.
Gotcha.
The 46 is the only stave we sell in the gift shop.
Gotcha.
It's already been.
Does Maker's Mark or anybody else empty barrels to?
Independent Stave does, I know for sure. We had one here for a while and someone bought it, but unfortunately it hadn't had any substance in it. We just sold an actual barrel, like, so it didn't really look authentic to any extent. Because a lot of people want it that's already, had that bourbon maturing in there.
This is like Las Vegas. Bellagio.
Take out each piece individually. All right, folks, if you have not stopped to take a second and look up for me, please do so. This is called the Spirit of the Maker. So 11 years ago, in 2013, Maker's Mark turned 60 years old. Of course, they called up none other than world-renowned glassblower Dale Chihuly and asked him to make them something. And folks, about $1 million later, this is what Chihuly came up with. So the red that flows throughout that is for that signature red wax. The blue is going to be for that limestone filtered water we use to make our bourbon. The green and yellow are specifically for the grains. And then folks, you're gonna notice there are a few cherubs throughout, and that is for that lovely angel share representation here. Now, this is the end of the road for us. Strategically, I've gotten you nice and liquored up. Now I'm gonna drop you off in the gift shop so you can buy it all up. If you do want to dip a bottle, folks, it does not cost anything to dip the bottle. You just have to pay for the bottle you would like to dip, okay?
Awesome. Perfect. Very good. Very good.